Hello, welcome to my channel. This is the Multipolar Dispatch channel. I am Manly. Today, we're going to examine one of the biggest shifts in modern history, the end of Europe's 500-year moment.
Episode 7. The end of Europe's 500-year moment. For almost 500 years, the world revolved around Europe. European ships crossed every ocean. European empires spanned every continent. European ideas reshaped governments, economies, and societies across the globe. Even today, much of the international system, from global finance to international law, still bears the unmistakable imprint of Europe. But history rarely stands still. Today, for the first time in centuries, the center of gravity of the world is shifting once again. Not because Europe is collapsing, but because the rest of the world is rising. The question is no longer whether Europe can remain the center of the world. The question is whether Europe can discover a new role in a truly multipolar age. To understand where Europe may be heading, we first need to understand how Europe arrived here. Ironically, Europe was not always the center of the world. 500 years ago, it was something quite different. It was a peninsula at the western edge of Eurasia. The richest civilizations lay far to the east: India, Persia, China, the spice-producing islands of Southeast Asia. Luxury goods, silk, porcelain, spices, and precious stones all traveled westward along ancient trading networks. Ironically, one of those ancient civilizations, China, would later spend nearly 2 centuries adjusting to the loss of its own centrality before re-emerging in our own time. We shall return to that story later. Between Europe and those riches stood powerful empires. Most significant of all was the Ottoman Empire. After the capture of Constantinople in 1453, the Ottomans controlled one of the great gateways between Europe and Asia. Trade certainly continued. Venetian and Genoese merchants still bought Eastern goods. Caravans still crossed Asia. Ships still crossed the Eastern Mediterranean. But Europe did not control those routes. Others did. Every intermediary added cost. Every intermediary exercised influence. For ambitious kingdoms on Europe's Atlantic coast, a question slowly emerged. What if there were another way? What if the oceans could bypass the old land routes altogether? That single question would change world history. Portugal was the first to answer it. For decades, Portuguese sailors pushed steadily south along the African coastline. Each voyage ventured a little farther. Each voyage improved maps, navigation, and shipbuilding. Then, in 1498, Vasco da Gama reached India by sea. For the first time, Europe possessed a direct maritime route to Asia. A revolution had begun. Only a few years earlier, another voyage had produced an equally astonishing result. Christopher Columbus, searching for Asia by sailing west, instead reached the Americas. Within a single generation, Europe's geographical horizons expanded beyond anything previously imagined. The Atlantic Ocean, once regarded as a terrifying barrier, became Europe's highway to the world. But discovery alone does not create global dominance. Others built upon those foundations. Spain established vast colonial empires, stretching across the Americas and the Pacific. Silver from the New World poured into Europe, transforming global commerce. Then came the Dutch. Often overlooked in popular history, the Dutch Republic helped invent many of the financial institutions that still shape our modern economy. The Dutch East India Company pioneered the joint stock corporation. Amsterdam became the world's leading financial center. Modern stock trading, commercial insurance, and sophisticated international finance flourished there. Trade itself became a source of enormous power. Finally came Britain. Combining naval supremacy, industrial innovation, and financial leadership, Britain built the largest empire in human history. Steam power, railways, telegraph cables, global banking, insurance, manufacturing. By the 19th century, Britain stood at the center of an increasingly interconnected world. What Portugal had begun, what Spain had expanded, what the Dutch had commercialized, Britain transformed into a truly global system. Notice something remarkable. Europe's rise was not the achievement of one nation. It was a relay. Portugal passed the baton to Spain, Spain to the Dutch to Britain. Each generation inherited the achievements of the last. Together, over 5 centuries, They built an international order centered upon European maritime power, industrial strength, and financial innovation. By 1900, Europe dominated global trade, finance, technology, and colonial possessions to an extent never before seen in history. It seemed almost unimaginable that this central position could ever change. But history has a habit of surprising those who believe it has reached its final destination. The 20th century brought two catastrophic world wars. Europe survived, but at an enormous cost. Its cities lay devastated, its economies exhausted, its empires increasingly unsustainable. Yet remarkably, European centrality did not disappear. Instead, leadership crossed the Atlantic. The United States inherited much of the global architecture that Europe had spent centuries constructing. The world's principal reserve currency remained Western. The world's leading military alliance remained Western. The principal international institutions remained Western. The global trading system remained overwhelmingly Western in character. Although the center of political leadership had shifted from London to Washington, the wider Western system still occupied the center of world affairs. For another 70 years, many assumed that this order represented not merely one chapter of history, but its final destination. That assumption, however, would prove premature. The 21st century has revealed something that many policymakers did not fully anticipate. Europe was not suddenly becoming weak. Rather, the rest of the world was becoming strong. For nearly 2 centuries, the Industrial Revolution was largely a Western story. Today it is no longer. Manufacturing has shifted eastward. Asia has become the world's largest manufacturing region. China has emerged as one of the world's leading trading nations. India is becoming an economic giant in its own right. The nations of Southeast Asia continue to industrialize. The Gulf states are investing heavily in technology, finance, and infrastructure. Across Africa, populations are expanding rapidly, creating both enormous opportunities and immense challenges. Latin America increasingly seeks a more independent voice in world affairs. The global economy is no longer organized around a single center. It is becoming a network of many centers. That is what a multipolar world actually looks like. For Europe, this creates an unfamiliar strategic environment. Its population is aging. Its share of the world's population continues to decline. Energy costs have become a significant economic challenge. Industrial competitiveness is under increasing pressure. Its defense remains closely tied to the United States through NATO. None of this means Europe is becoming poor. Far from it. Europe remains one of the wealthiest regions on Earth. Its universities remain among the world's finest. Its engineering is world-class. Its scientific research continues to produce remarkable innovation. Its cities remain among the most prosperous anywhere. This is not a story of collapse. It is a story of relative change. For 5 centuries, Europe occupied an exceptional position in world history. Today, history is becoming more widely shared. History offers no single future. But it does suggest several possibilities. The first is renewal. Europe could invest more heavily in innovation, advanced manufacturing, and technological leadership. It could deepen defense cooperation, strengthen energy resilience, develop greater strategic autonomy. Rather than competing through size alone, Europe could compete through quality, education, research, and high-value industries. History has repeatedly shown that great civilizations are capable of reinvention. Europe may yet surprise the world again. A second possibility is continued Atlantic integration. The partnership with the United States has provided Europe with decades of security and prosperity. That relationship may deepen further. Europe would remain an indispensable pillar of the wider Western alliance. Prosperous, secure, influential, but perhaps less strategically independent than many European leaders would wish. A third possibility is more subtle. Europe remains wealthy. Its historic cities continue to attract millions. Its universities educate future generations from around the world. Its museums, orchestras, literature, and scientific institutions retain immense prestige. Europe becomes one of humanity's great centers of culture, education, and innovation, even if many of the world's largest geopolitical decisions are increasingly shaped elsewhere. Not a fallen continent, but no longer the unquestioned center of world affairs. A fourth possibility is more uncertain. The European project was born from the ashes of two devastating world wars. Its ambition was extraordinary, to make another great European war almost unthinkable. For more than 70 years, that ambition has largely succeeded. By historical standards, this has been one of the longest periods of peace among Europe's major powers. Yet history reminds us that peace cannot simply be assumed. Economic pressures, political fragmentation, rising nationalism, demographic change, external geopolitical competition, all place strains upon institutions. Whether Europe responds by becoming more united or more divided will shape the continent for generations. History guarantees neither outcome, only that each generation must choose its own path. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson history has to offer. States rise, states fall, empires expand, empires retreat, borders shift, capitals move. But civilizations are different. Some fade gradually from the center of history. Others demonstrate an extraordinary capacity for renewal. Chinese civilization is perhaps the most remarkable example. Across more than 2,000 years, dynasties rose and fell. Periods of unity alternated with centuries of fragmentation. Foreign conquest came and went, yet the written language endured. Historical memory endured. Administrative traditions endured. A civilizational identity endured. China did not return as the same state. No civilization ever does. But it returned as the latest chapter of a very old story. Europe's story has been different. For 5 centuries, Europe occupied the strategic center of world affairs. Its achievements in navigation, science, finance, industry, medicine, engineering, law, philosophy, and democratic government helped shape the modern world. Those achievements remain part of humanity's shared inheritance. Europe is not disappearing. Its civilization is not ending. The question is different. Can Europe redefine itself when it is no longer the unquestioned center of the international system? Can it discover a new purpose? In a world where influence is increasingly shared among many civilizations. 500 years ago, Europe looked toward the Atlantic because it could not dominate the great land routes to the east. By mastering the oceans, it transformed history. Today, history is moving once again, not simply from west to east, not from one empire replacing another, but toward a world of many centers. The end of Europe's 500-year moment does not mean the end of Europe. It means the beginning of a new chapter, because history is not a straight line. It is not the permanent triumph of one civilization over another. History moves in cycles. It shifts, it adapts, it surprises, and perhaps the defining question of the 21st century is not whether Europe can remain at the center of the world. It is whether Europe, like every great civilization before it, can discover how to flourish when history no longer revolves around it. Because history never truly ends, it simply moves on.